And 5 and 4 and 3, and when I'm on the mic, the suckers run.
What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify, and check out our website at talklouderpodcast.com. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host Jason McMaster. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but our guest today... Our guest today is a former member of AC/DC.
You seem to be glowing a little bit, Dave.
I'm pretty excited. I mean, we've got Simon Wright on the show today. Simon, of course, spent a number of years with AC/DC playing drums. He did 3 albums with AC/DC, and that's just one aspect of his career. He's done a lot of other great work with a lot of other big names, and we'll talk about that. But I'm just thrilled that we've got a guy on the show who was in AC/DC. That's pretty amazing.
So, I've come to know Simon just a little bit over the years. I met him when he first started working with Rhino Bucket.
Right.
And, Broken Teeth did some shows with Rhino Bucket, of course. And you're like, holy shit, that's Simon Wright. The next thing you know, he's hanging out with you, and he's chatting, and he's, patting you on the back, and it's like, what? That's Simon Wright. It's part of my childhood kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's one of the guys, I've come to know him enough to be able to say this. He's kind of just one of those guys who's living his life, and life is loving him back.
Yeah.
Because he joined AC/DC at 19 or 20 years old.
Crazy.
Let that soak in for a second.
Yeah.
He's an Englishman, and he's a gentleman, and you're going to soon find out that you have records that he plays drums on that you didn't know that he's the drummer on. We're talking, he's worked with Jeff Tate of Queensryche, Pat Travers, Ronnie James Dio, and of course the great AC/DC. UFO. Thank you, Dave. And
Rhino Bucket.
And there's probably more that he's just keeping in his pocket, because he's just that kind of a humble guy. And without further ado, I just want to welcome Mr. Simon Wright to the Talk Louder podcast.
Simon, how are you? Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Dave. Hi, Jason. Nice to be here.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, it's an honor, big honor.
Yeah.
Cheers.
It's not every day we get to say we have a former member of AC/DC on our podcast. So thank you for joining us. We'll touch on a lot of that and a bunch of your other stuff as well, because we want to bring people up to date with what you're currently doing, as well as all of your past accolades.
Let's do that first. What do you have going on in these strange new times? What do you got going on right now? Current?
Oh, it's well, at the beginning of this year, I was asked by some friends to do, one was an album by a band called Heaven and Earth. My friend Stuart Smith has had that band for quite a while, and there was a bit of a shake-up in the band, and he'd got himself a new singer, and he asked me to play drums on it, so I did that, and then that's come out since then. And it's available on Frontiers Records.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
What style is that?
It's probably safe to say it's like classic rock in the kind of a bluesy rainbow kind of way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it's pretty good. It turned out good. And then about 3 weeks after that, my friend Kevin Gucci, he has a band called Of Gods and Monsters, and he asked me to do that album as well. So we're still mixing that.
He's a Texan, isn't he?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Kevin Gucci. Yeah, he fronted Omen for a second.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin's a good guy, man.
Good people, good guy.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we're still mixing that one, and hopefully it'll be out, before the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Excellent. And so that's called Gods and Monsters?
Of Gods and Monsters, yeah.
And the other project is called Heaven and Earth.
Yes, and the album is called 5. It's like a V.
Cool.
Yeah.
Roman numeral.
Yeah.
Wow, so that's you're fairly busy, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a busy period, after a whole desert of nothing. But
Well,
yeah, I'm not going to club, right?
yeah.
But there's talk of some shows with those two bands, but my main thing is Dio Returns, which is being organized for next year. So, and that is either going to be with the hologram or without. I'm not 100% sure at the moment, but it's still going to be us celebrating Ronnie's music and his legacy, and
yes, sir.
what we've been doing for quite some time now. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
fantastic. I wanna just go. Not that it has to be any timeline here, because we're just having a conversation over coffee, if you will. I want you to run through the records that you recorded with Ronnie, if you don't mind. Which records are you on, the Dio stuff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first one was after I left AC/DC. The first album I did with him was called Lock Up the Wolves.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was back in the 90s. That's when I started with him and stuff. Okay. The second one, then he went back to Black Sabbath. So there was a period in there where he was doing other stuff. And then I rejoined in 98. We did the album, oh my God, no, it was in 2000, Magica. So it's Lock Up the Wolves, Magica, Killing the Dragon, Master of the Moon. And in between all that were 2 live DVDs and CDs. One was done in New York City and one was done in London, which turned out pretty good. So, yeah, all in all, I was there about probably 14 years or something, in and out stuff. So it was a great time.
How did the lineup change, if any, between those records? It had to probably change a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, it did. Yes. I mean,
as far as guitar players, bass players, keyboardists, right? Yeah,
there were three bass players. Mm-hmm. There were 3 guitar players that all changed. The keyboard player was Scott Warren the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to play with Jimmy Bain. We did the Magica album with Jimmy and stuff. Great bass player. And before that, there was a guy called, when I first joined, there was a bass player called Teddy Cook from Long Island. He was a cool guy. After that, there was another guy called Chuck Garrick, who's since been with Alice Cooper for so many years now.
Yeah, Chuck is a fantastical personality and monster singer player.
He's got a great stage presence too. Yeah. He's really cool.
He's ominous. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And then for a little while after that, we had it was close to the end before Ronnie passed away. We had Rudy Sarzo on bass, which was fantastic.
Sure.
He's my brother, so that was an amazing time. And then guitar players, it was when I first joined up back, it was when I first got the gig, it was Rowan Robertson.
Correct.
Young lad who could play.
He was a kid, yeah.
Yeah, he was only 17, just turning 18. And then moving on, that was when I rejoined again in 98, it was Tracy G. Then after him, it was, I've got to get this right. It wasn't Craig. No, it was Doug Aldridge.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Jimmy found Doug Aldridge. We used, Craig was in the band, but he has some family issues or something. It's all common. You know what bands are like.
Oh yeah. Well,
So,
especially when it's a bit spotted like that, as far as when you're gonna make a record and work. Yeah, I mean, I can understand
yeah.
everyone's availability. You have to. A lot of fans don't think like it's a juggle of calendar days and
Yeah.
times and right. So
It can be, yeah. I mean, and it's a lot of times it's through no fault of your own. It's just
no.
People have circumstances and they have things going on, and a lot of the times with Dio, it wasn't over arguments. It was just like like maybe family issues or health issues and stuff. There were never any falling outs, no big fights or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug moved on to play in Whitesnake.
Yes.
That was a while ago back. Jimmy just kind of didn't show up one day. It was just we got, where's Jimmy? I don't know where he is.
Well, and
so it's strange,
Yeah, the Jimmy thing, real quick. He's legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was terrible how he passed. He was on one of the cruises, one of the Monsters or cruises or something, and fell ill and didn't come home necessarily. Out at sea, kind of.
I know, it's awful.
Strange.
I mean, what do you do for the rest of the cruise? It's awful. I actually ran into him. We were at an event probably a couple of weeks before that, and he didn't look very well. Jimmy liked to hit things pretty hard, as we all know, I think, but he didn't look that good. And it's just awful. I mean, I saw him back in like '77 when he was with Rainbow, with Cozy and Richie and Ronnie. And now I'm playing in a band. This is brilliant. I love bass playing.
Yeah.
And now I'm playing a band with him. He came back into Dio, and he'd been doing the 12-step program and doing everything the right way.
Yeah.
Came in and he was great. He worked a treat, playing his ass off.
Yep.
Did fall by the wayside a little bit, but I really miss him. We had a lot in common, just him being Scottish, me being English and stuff. So it was a good time.
Well, his tone is undeniable. I like his style. He plays with a pick. You know it's him when you hear it. Just like a lot of legendary players, it's them from the first note. When you think about the mix on as far back as, of course, Holy Diver, as soon as you hear that plug and chug, you know that's Jimmy right away. And the way those records are mixed, it's Jimmy too, because you can fucking hear him.
Yeah. He was one of those, a very, very British or Scottish bass player, just meat and potatoes, adding in some really subtle, cool stuff, but keeping it solid as all hell.
Well, you guys worked very well together, and
we did.
Obvious. Yeah.
What was it like working with Ronnie all those years? I mean, how was he as a personality and as a creative influence? And just tell us a little bit about what it was like to be in the same room with him and creating music, and then even outside of the studio, just on a social level. What was he like?
It was great. I mean, he was everything. I mean, because he was such a smart guy. He was such a funny guy as well. But it soon became apparent when I was first working with him that he didn't take any bullshit. I mean, if you were in a studio with him, you better, if you're going to suggest something, it better be a damn good idea.
Well, yeah.
Around with him, which I loved. I thought that's great. Let's get to the point here, with him. And I mean, there were some hard times as well. He had a lot of stuff going on with respect to the band and all. It was his band. He had 40, 50 interviews a week. I mean, there were times when he was absolutely pissed off. And you can't blame him one bit, you know. I mean, but I loved his perfectionism, and he was just a workaholic, you know. And he was always thinking music. He was always thinking about the set and writing the songs and changing them up. And, you know, sometimes this was right before we were going to play. He'd say, no, let's do that bit twice before we go into that, you know, and you're going, what?
Yeah, right. Well,
he just really kept you on your toes.
What about like when he would start to write a song, do you know, were you involved? How involved were you in the process? Whether it be a lot of the time, all of the time, some of the time, when he was coming up with ideas, were you guys working as a band? Was it Ronnie and the full band with you there, sort of taking notes and writing maps and things like that, or would he bring in pretty much a finished piece, or how did it? Give us a little scenario.
There's I wouldn't say all of the above, but and as far as being involved, I would say some of the time, you know, because it was mainly me and Craig who were there. You know, he would be bouncing ideas off Craig, and Craig, you know, that would give him the freedom to do that because Craig would be working the Pro Tools and stuff. Although Ronnie could work the Pro Tools as well. And my input would be, I'd be there creating the drum patterns and stuff, because he always felt that it was important to get the style of the beat, you know, and obviously the tempo right for the song he was writing. He wanted to make it, you know, but he could do that as well. But a lot of times he'd want my opinion, and I'd come in, and because he'd be programming the drum machine just very simply. And, you know, he's not a drummer, you know. I mean, probably could have been, but the way that the drum machine was programmed, it was very un-drummer-like. It's like a guitar. Sometimes guitar players do that when they're you know, doing the drum machine. So you have to make it into something else that's actually playable.
I feel, yeah, of course. I feel like if you present a song idea, you know, whatever, a riff with a verse and a chorus, if you will, to a drummer with, you know, just a kick snare, basic, simple, straight, no crashes or fills.
Yeah.
Sometimes the drummer is a bit disenchanted by what it is they're supposed to do. And I almost feel like just a basic click track doesn't have, because, you know, I feel like the drums should be part of the riff. I feel like when that thing is turning and pushing and pulling on ups and down beats, the drum, you know, the guitar riff, or even sometimes the vocal, the drums should follow the vocal sometimes. If there's a couple of rat-a-tat-tat accented lyrical accents, and sometimes the drums pushing with those accents makes the song. It really becomes the hook of the song. So, yeah, I just wanted to ask you that because as we know, there's not one way to do it. There's not one way to write a song. So no. I mean, Ronnie was always, we were always talking drums. I mean, and that was the great thing. I mean, he was always asking me what I thought about this, and let's change that little bit there, you know, and stuff. And it was great, you know. It was a great relationship that way, you know, talking about the drums and that and getting them right.
Yeah. How did you get that gig? Obviously, you're well known at this point after your stint with AC/DC. But did you audition along with hundreds of other people, or how did that happen?
It was just through a friend of a friend. My ex-wife, she's no longer with us, but she knew Wendy and stuff, and they would have a chat. And they kind of found out that Vinny wasn't interested anymore, so. I went down and we did like a rehearsal. It was just me, you know. There was no big line of drummers out the door, and it was a little bit of a worrying time for Ronnie, because he only had 2 or 3 weeks before he had the studio booked, and they couldn't cancel it. They could have canceled it, but it wasn't available for like another 6 months, and they had a record to do. So. yeah, I went down, we played and went through some old stuff and some of the new stuff and everything, and it just kind of clicked. It was just word of mouth, really.
How was your approach to the drums different, if at all, from AC/DC to Dio? Because I feel like Dio would offer you a little more freedom as far as fills and a little more complexity maybe than AC/DC. So is that something you always had in your back pocket as a drummer just all your life, or were there new challenges with joining Dio?
Well, I'm always learning, but I always wanted to. I guess I did have it in my back pocket. I mean, I was, I needed to be somewhat more creative after leaving AC/DC. That was, one of the big reasons. There's nothing against AC/DC. I've said this 1,000 times. I mean, but the way that Ronnie let Vinny work his drums on those albums and stuff, that really appealed to me. That kind of wide open, 4-bar drum fill going into, back to the verse or something, or just the freedom that was there. That really appealed to me. So
yeah, kind of seemed like Vinny. To an outsider looking in and just even hearing or watching Vinny do that, it's like, oh, that's like Vinny style. It's something that seemed to a fan or a drummer sort of like watching and learning as a style of Vinny's, but may or may not have just been like Ronnie suggesting or Vinny just taking an entire measure to fill up.
Yeah, well, I've spoken to Vinny often about it, and he's saying, sometimes I really overplay, and I'm like, really?
You think?
But in a good way,
Yeah. I thought so.
This led to a conversation with Ronnie about that, but that particular time, when I first joined, and because I said, well, I want to play more, but I don't want to play too much. I mean, some of the songs that I had to play that Vinny had obviously recorded, I had to capture like the essence of some of those, the fills he'd done, because I think they're really important to the song. People are expecting to hear that. So I would do that, but I would kind of, when it came to our recording, I would add stuff in a little, not too much. And but what I thought was kind of like just an introduction to what could be, sort of thing. So, but it was really enjoyable just to break free a little bit, and
Well, I call that I call that paying attention. When the drummer's paying attention to what the song it needs to have, if you're playing someone else's bits and you're the new guy or whatever on certain material, You said it right. You're paying attention to the things that what you, as well as just millions of fans, if you will, have memorized as part of that song. Those are it's like a time machine. Those are moments in time that, they, from listening to the songs at home, to the journey to the concert, to tailgating in the parking lot, waiting for the doors to open, and then hearing that favorite song live. Whether it's Vinny or you, they need to hear that, and so I just call it paying attention. So good on you. Yeah,
it's also, I think, I got the utmost respect for those players too. So I think it's a bit of respect as well as, I mean, I've been Vinny Appice, Bill Ward, Cozy Powell, you name it.
You sure have.
You just kept going, and who am I going to be next?
Well, You're Andy Simon, Parker. My man. You're Simon. You are Simon.
So. Well, I think it's awesome that you moved on from AC/DC to Dio, obviously another legendary character in hard rock, heavy metal, and as you were talking earlier, you were sort of the anchor during a turbulent time when there was people coming and going, but you were always there holding down the beat. So there must have been some chemistry between you and Ronnie that kept you there for the length of time that you were there.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I do remember at one point there was only me and Ronnie in the band. It was just like, what are we doing?
Well, is it true? Isn't it true that you lived in the guest house?
At Ronnie's?
Yeah.
He didn't have a guest house. He had a lot of bedrooms up there. He had a big. Craig stayed a lot as well.
Okay, so you were part of the family, like literally living at Ronnie's house.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be the three of us sometimes. You know, when we were talking earlier about the writing, he had a studio downstairs, so we'd all meet up at some point in the day, and it was never strict, you know.
Right. It sounds like heavy metal summer camp at Ronnie's house.
Yeah.
Heavy metal sleepover. I love it so much.
I know. I went there and I ended up there for 13 years later. I'm like, well, okay, this must be going well, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that would not leave.
We did a lot of work on the house too, which was totally away from the music, which was great. I like doing the fixing walls and putting in irrigation and all sorts of stuff.
No wonder he kept you around.
Yeah. Got to pay your pay, right?
Oh, you play drums also? Oh,
yeah, right. Play drums again soon.
Hey, Wendy, he keeps pretty good time with a hammer. I wonder if he can play drums too. Yeah.
So I want to go backwards a bit from the Ronnie James Dio years and talk about obviously AC/DC. When the first time I ever saw AC/DC was the Fly on the Wall tour, and I think Jason and I discovered one time we were comparing notes, and we both realized our first AC/DC concert was the Fly on the Wall tour. So that means you were the first drummer I ever saw with AC/DC. Mm-hmm. And I always thought it was astonishing that you got that gig and you were barely 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty young. They were all a lot older than me. But you know, they kept an eye out on me and stuff. So yeah, I got a huge break very young.
Yeah, I'll say.
Can you? I know that you've told the story 1,000 times. You know, our dear friend Demetrius Bermudez said, you know, he'll tell you the story. Just ask him. He'll tell you the story. So please tell us the story about kind of how that sort of like came about.
Okay, this will be the 1,000th time.
Well, we can thank Demi for this.
I'll make it brief. I mean, I get asked it a lot. I mean, I was living in London, and a friend of mine saw an advertisement in the classified section of what they had back then were called music papers, like sounds. And anyway, it said drummer wanted, if you don't hit hard, don't apply. So she said, well, you do, don't you? And I went, oh, yeah, okay. Because I was on hiatus, you know, I'm like smoking a lot of pot, and I don't smoke pot anymore, but I used to. So I was hanging around in London, and anyway, I answered the ad and I went down there, and it was the drum tech and a drum kit and a PA and monitors. And he asked me, he was a Welsh guy, he said, can you play along to these 3 songs? And it was ZZ Top Tush, Zeppelin, Black Dog, and Shoot the Thrill, AC/DC. So I played them, finished. And he said, oh, that was great. You know, we'll be in touch. And I went, yeah, right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the phone goes about 3 hours later, and it's him. And he said, can you come back tomorrow? And I said, you know, I've told this story a lot. No, I can't come back because I haven't got any money. He said, don't worry, get yourself in the taxi and we'll take care of it. So I thought, oh, okay, they must be interested. And it was a pretty fancy kind of rehearsal studio. It was expensive to rehearse there. So I go back the next day, and he meets me in the lobby and takes me down the corridor. And there are all these flight cases with AC/DC on them. And I tapped him on the shoulder. I went, you're kidding, right? And he went, no. I'm like, oh, fuck. I had no idea who it was, you know. Yeah. The door opens, and it's Angus and Mal and Cliff. Brian was back in Florida, I later learned. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they were great. I mean, they were so unassuming. They were so un-rockstarish, you know. I mean, it was, hey, how you doing? You know, what do you know? So we ran through, like, Back in Black, Whole Lot Rosie, Let There Be Rock. We finished up, and they said, great, you know. So they sort of moved over and sat on this couch and started talking, you know, and I thought I'd better follow them, you know, but I don't know. So they started talking about touring and schedules and stuff, and it was weird because I'm thinking, should I leave now? This sounds kind of private, you know.
Yeah.
So I tapped Mal and I said, does this mean I'm in the band? And he said, yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? I'm like,
oh, that's very beautiful.
Very formal.
Yeah, straightforward, man. No airs and graces. I mean, and I couldn't, you know, as I said before, I couldn't wait to get out of there and start making phone calls. You know?
I bet. Right. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
all of barely 20 years old. Yeah, you're kind of got the energy for that.
So what? Yeah. So yeah, you're barely 20 years old. You get the gig. You go on tour with AC/DC. It's nothing but arenas. What's the most difficult adjustment for you to make as, you know, a kid who's probably just been doing clubs and now you're jet setting around? What's the most difficult adjustment for you?
Yeah, that was the difficult thing, being away from, I was, at best, I was away from home like 3 or 4 days. I mean, now I'm going away for like 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'd never really done that before. So it got a little bit, you know, kind of, I want to say, probably lonely, you know, you're like, because, you know, you see the guys at the show and at the bar afterwards, you know, and stuff, and maybe at lunch or breakfast. But yeah, it was being away somewhere else all the time. It was weird to me, but I got used to it. I mean, you have to.
Yeah. So for just for our listeners and everyone, this is, so you're jumping into a leg of a tour or was it the beginning of the actual Flick of the Switch tour and not Fly on the Wall? Is this correct?
Yeah, I did that tour before Fly on the Wall, Flick of the Switch, but
yeah. So
Phil Rudd had recorded the album, but I jumped in and
right.
And we know
the video.
This, yeah, we know this when we watch the video and we're going, well, take no offense, but who's this guy?
Yeah.
It's not Phil, right?
Because we know Phil played on the album, but you see the Flick of the Switch video and Simon's in the video. So yeah, it makes sense that you
like magic. Come on.
Yeah. That's studio magic.
So just to sort of summarize for our listeners, you joined the band, you did the Flick of the Switch tour, and then the albums that you appeared on with AC/DC are Fly on the Wall, Who Made Who, and Blow Up Your Video, right?
That's right. Yeah, those. Yeah.
So
those are great records.
Like mid-'80s, 85 to 88 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was 83 and a half. I could be wrong. 83 and a half to 88. Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds right to me, because when you think about Flick, that's 83.
Yeah.
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 But what an accomplishment, what an honor to be able to say that you played on. I mean, you didn't just join a tour and help the band muddle through during a difficult time. You're actually recorded, documented on 3 AC/DC albums. That's awesome.
It is. I mean, back then, you know, you really didn't have a lot of time to think about it, because some of the tours were really quite long, and I'm not complaining, but you were just constantly, you know, kind of working. And there were years, they like to take a year off here and there and stuff and all, which, you know, I thought was a bit too long, but, you know, it was like, you know, it's just circumstances. But yeah, no, you just didn't have time to think back then. You were just doing it.
So out of all the guys in AC/DC, which guy do you feel like you bonded the most with? Whose personality was most in line with yours?
Well, I think I had a lot of respect for Malcolm. You know, I mean, as far as bonding, we were just, you know, guys on the road. I mean, we all got along, but to some extent. But Malcolm struck me straight away as the dude, the guy. You know, this guy is quietly but in charge, but could smash you over the head with a hammer any minute. No, but not with a hammer, with his voice. You know what I mean? He was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
He was tough, fair, but you didn't want to mess with him, you know. And he had a lot going on, you know. And it's such a shame he ended up getting that horrible fucking disease. So because he was such a clever man.
Yeah.
You know?
So I had the privilege of interviewing Malcolm one time, and he told me that, you know, as brothers do, there was times when they'd get on each other's nerves and bicker and fight. Were you ever witness to any of that? Any of that stuff?
Yeah. Only I saw a couple of things between them, which are like just arguments that didn't last very long. But there was one time Malcolm was having a really hard time when we were on the road. I can't remember which tour it was. I can't remember which one. I don't want to say unless I'm right. But anyway, we were on the road and we ended up and Malcolm had started drinking a lot, you know, in his minibar and stuff. And he was having a really hard time. I think it was with his son had a medical problem, and there were all these dates ahead, and he couldn't get out of it, you know, and he really wanted to be at home, and so he just started drinking, and I'd never seen him drunk right on stage, but this one show he was just absolutely shit-faced, and he's like hanging off the cymbals and pulling the cymbals off, you know, the stands and stuff. And it was just fucking bizarre. I'd never seen anything like it, you know, and I felt for him, you know, because I you know, we kind of knew what was going on with him. But we finished the show and there were these stairs going down. It was one of these stages that they erect outdoor. Mm-hmm. And I was at the top of the stairs with Cliff, and that Malcolm and Angus were at the bottom, just in this huge ball of fists and legs and stuff, fighting the fuck out of each other. And we were all like, what is going on here? You know? Like,
yeah.
And then it all just kind of came out, you know, afterwards. He came in and said, I can't do this anymore. And he went home and stuff, and he got well and he got better, and his son got better, thankfully. And to carry on, we brought in Stevie Young, his nephew, and Stevie came in and did a cracking job.
I'm a huge fan of Stevie's band when he was a kid, the Starfighters.
Oh, yeah. Starfight.
I have a couple of Starfighters records that I love that kind of, well, you know that I like that stuff. Bluesy, four on the floor, simple, you know, crazy cat yowling vocals and so to be, again, I hate to make you like Rolodex jam your memory files here.
I'll try.
What tour was this that Malcolm, the first time Stevie filled in for Mal was when?
Blow Up Video.
Now, yeah, it was Blow Up Your Video.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that tour, and I remember being, as a fan, I was a little disappointed that Malcolm wasn't on stage, but I also was aware of why he wasn't on stage, so I could appreciate that he was taking care of himself. And I thought it was great that they bring in a family member, and Stevie did a great job. So, but yeah, I distinctly remember that because I was at that show, and I knew that Malcolm wasn't on stage. But
yeah, Steve's. You know, it's with Malcolm's blessing, the whole thing. There's no one else, you know.
Yeah.
And he actually played a lot like he played like a little bit like Mal. I mean, it was cool that way, you know. There's no messing around, just hammering it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So out of the three albums you did with AC/DC, and Who Made Who is a greatest hits compilation of sorts. So you're really only on about 3 or 4 songs on that album. Is that correct?
Yeah, they were songs that we recorded because that album was associated with that movie, Maximum Overdrive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they wrote some songs for the movie, like Who Made Who was in it, and then there was some other that were tracks that were just kind of instrumental because they went with the movie, the background music.
Right.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping for an original album again. I mean, but I really didn't have anything to do with that side of things,
Sure.
Yeah.
So it ended up being that. Yeah.
So out of the 3 albums you did with AC/DC, which one are you most proud of performance wise as far as your drumming?
I'd like to think maybe Blow Up Your Video. It's really surprising when you meet people and you're at shows and they want to talk to you about your time with that band and stuff. And stuff. You get people who come up and who are just freaking out about Fly on the Wall, their favorite album, or Blow Up Your Video and stuff. And because I think, when a band has such a big catalog of music and all, and you've got such a big table of content to choose from, I think people do go back, because when those albums came out, they'd had so much success with like Back in Black and For Those About to Rock that it's hard to keep that going.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's not impossible. You can't have a Back in Black every single time you release an album.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I think a lot of people kind of take a look back at those albums that, like Your Fly on the Wall and Who Made Who and Blow Up Your Video, and have another look at it. It's good.
Yeah. So what's your favorite AC/DC album to feature Phil as a fan?
Oh, that's always been Power Age. I love that.
Yes. Everyone says Power Age, and
we're all in agreement there.
Yeah. Although me and George DeLevo argue a lot because he's Let There Be Rock and I'm Power Age. So
yeah.
But, what's to argue about? They're both brilliant.
Yeah, that's
true.
right. Let's talk about and I feel like we talked about this in your Dio years, but let's talk about writing process for, if not all, at least one writing session for an AC/DC record.
Well, that would be Malcolm and Angus would come in. And they'd have like a rough idea down. I do remember, and it's no disrespect to Angus, but I remember Malcolm's demos, as it were a little bit more organized, and some of Angus's were a little bit, you kind of had to listen and figure what he was thinking, because he would play drums to them as well. But the trouble is, he used to like Keith Moon, so he'd be playing all over the thing, so you were trying to hear the riff,
Yeah.
But there was some great ideas in there from both of them. I mean, and then other times it would be just sitting in the rehearsal studio and they'd be just, seeing what came out, and there's a couple of three or four songs ended up coming out that way.
Magic.
Because they did listen to you, I mean, there's not much leeway really with the drums, it's more or less of like, am I playing 4 on the floor? Am I just playing straight? Or when am I coming in? Am I doing crashes? It was that kind of thing for me. But, it was still about the feel of the song. We'd start jamming it. And it was all about the feel of it, not so much the content of the drums. We all know AC/DC music anyway, straight ahead. So that's what a songwriting situation.
I've always thought that everything has its place.
Yeah.
And it's, not just AC/DC, but let's talk about AC/DC. Fuck it. You can actually say especially AC/DC in this situation because everybody thinks that it's so simple, and a lot of musos think AC/DC, that's easy to play. It's 3-chord rock. Okay, well, why are you playing it wrong then? Kind of a thing. So everything has its place, and if one thing, a kick drum pattern, a note on the guitar, bass too busy, whatever it is. If that one little thing is out of place, you fucked it up.
Yeah,
and it's wrong.
It's the same when you're songwriting too. I mean, you can take like a downstroke and turn it to an upstroke, and it just changed everything.
That's right.
It's the simple, and it's so hard to write songs that simple, with a hook and a catchy line. It is not easy. Everything's been done. It's like, wow. When you see it in front of you, it's amazing.
Such an institution. It's such an institution. You could say the same about the Ramones.
Yeah.
I'll just say it again. It's 3-chord rock and roll. A lot of people think it's easy. It's a little quick sometimes on the hi-hat work, but whatever it is, it's an institution. Everything has its place. And if this one thing is out of whack, it doesn't sound like the band anymore. It doesn't sound like AC/DC. It's like you said yourself, Simon, is like when to come in. When do we want to put the push note, the upbeat? When do we want to turn? When does the vocal come in? When does the bass come in? Because there's a lot of songs that, well, at least a few I can think of, where I feel like the song map is fairly identical, where there's no bass until the chorus.
Right.
Such as Highway, or, you go Rolling Stones. You shook me. Exactly. Yeah. My point. I was going to say it's almost the same model as Rolling Stones' Honky Tonk Woman. There's no bass except for the chorus. A lot of people are not listening like that. They just want to groove and feel the song. They're not. They don't care when the drums come in or when the bass comes in or whatever, until they have to learn how to play it.
Yeah. When I was learning, I kind of, it sounds stupid, but I kind of had an epiphany. I was trying to figure Back in Black, and I'm going, okay, that's pretty straightforward. But it increases in tempo when it gets to the chorus to nearly twice the speed as it does in the verse. That's the whole thing behind it. It's the same with You Shook Me. That song starts off at one tempo, and by the time you get to the chorus, it's nearly doubled. So it's all about, like I was saying earlier, when you were songwriting, it's finding the groove for the song. It's not written out somewhere. It's just a feeling. It's like an energy that you have to put in.
Do you know for certain if on the older material that Angus and Mal were writing or even thinking about making fill or using, and have you used on an AC/DC record in the studio a click track? Are you guys are not at all because of what you're saying? Like, the tempo's rising when you get into the chorus and then pulled back slightly for the verse, right? Yeah.
I don't know if Phil used a click track. Maybe someone can write in and let us know. I have no idea.
Yeah,
but I did.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. And just for listeners.
Wait a minute. No, I didn't. I didn't use a click track for the album Fly on the Wall, but I did for Who They Do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And for Blow Up Your Video. And that was fine.
They were okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, and so was I. It was kind of like, because technology was changing, like we all know. We were all, it's going to digital. So, that was the way that those producers wanted to work. So I was fine with it. No problem. Yeah. But I don't know if Phil did it. I doubt it, the way that those songs pick up and drop back down again.
That's what made me want to ask, just to get your opinion, or if there's any common knowledge behind it. Because when you think about, again, what you said about, moving to the build up into the chorus, and then back down again, how the tempo's, like really fluctuating. The listener may or may not even know that that's technically what's happening. It's natural.
That's when you know you've got it right.
Right.
When no one can tell, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, it's the natural flow of the song, and it should be like that.
If the tempo is that different and you know it because you're technically involved, the listener is either swaying or dancing or headbanging or doing whatever the hell people like to do with AC/DC on, because that could be anything. I feel like that leaning forward is natural, and it's almost like I think AC/DC is one of the bands that sort of like wrote that in the history books about how it's the feel of the song without changing the tempo. And if there were or was a tick-tock, a metronome going, a click track in your headphones while you're recording that, being able to play behind that click, because it's a robot. It doesn't know. It's an inanimate, it's a robot. It doesn't know to be, so the human error on purpose kind of thing, to be able to play just under it, and then and then just above it, and be able to pull back into it when the second verse comes and settles. That is magical. That is the sign of a great musician that can play that. Doesn't matter what instrument it is.
You know, I mean, I must admit, when I first started using the click track, it was awkward and odd, but I figured it out. And I've used it so many times that I have learned how to do what you're saying. I mean, you kind of just lay back off the click. You can hear it, and you can hear you're behind a little bit, but you're behind in time.
Yes.
So, and then you got to kick it up the ass a bit, and you get on top of that click, and you're on ahead of it a little, but it's all good because it's in time. You know that, and it just through going and playing with it so many times that you kind of get to know how to do that. Not worry much about the click.
I call that making friends with the metronome.
Engineers love it.
Yes, they do, especially in the digital world.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Simon. So at the time that you're in AC/DC, videos are a big part of promoting an album, promoting a band, etc. So you are in the band during a time frame when, and you're featured in a number of videos, of course, during that time. I just don't see AC/DC as a video kind of band. So tell me what that process was like when you're filming a video. It seems like a necessary evil, and I can just imagine the AC/DC guys going, "Oh God, not this again." You know?
No, they were a bit like that. I mean, they were, but they hooked up with this guy called David Mallet, and they needed the right kind of director, and he came up with some great ideas. You know, like all the Anguses. On the video, I think it was Heat Seeker and Who Made Who.
Yeah.
With all the Anguses in the background there and stuff. And, you know, it was just such a great idea for that band, because that's the way the band were. It was all about it. You know, you have Angus in the front there, and that's what the band's about. And then their album covers are just like black with AC/DC written on it. It's gold. It's got a cannon on it. You know, it's simple. It's, you know, flick of the switch, he's pulling a switch. I mean, and these videos, I felt, really represented what the album covers were coming out were like. You know, it was just direct in your face. It's Angus and the band, and except it's a lot of Anguses. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that helped a lot, because it was kind of like, oh, not another video, you know, but they were fun to do. I mean, like I say, this director, David Mallet, kept things moving along great, you know, and it worked.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, because AC/DC seems like such a blue collar working class band, and the whole Hollywood spot, you know, all that stuff just sounds like the absolute opposite of what they got into this for. And I can just imagine them.
It was, you know, it was a little weird at first, because you know, I had been in smaller bands and stuff, and it was a little bit like that, you know, the girls, come on back, you know, all this, but they were just, you know, there were girls too, don't get me wrong, but it was more of a smaller unit, you know, with a big unit around it. You know, I mean, the road crew was like 40 people. I mean, I didn't even know who they were, you know, opposed to, you know, usually there's 3 or 4 guys or whatever. And no, it was a very kind of like a club
type
kind
circle.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a whole lot of members to that club, and you got to be one of them.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I still, you know,
Yeah.
whenever I'm asked about it, it was a great honor and a great privilege to be involved.
Well, we first met, you and I, when you were working with Rhino Bucket, and you made which Rhino Bucket records are you on? Remind me again.
Pain.
Well, the first one I did was called Pain.
Pain. Mm-hmm.
And then it all kind of fell apart, and they started up again. George got it going again and asked me to come in, and I did an album called Hardest Town.
That's right.
And I think that's all I did with them.
Okay.
Yeah. They did a re-release of Pain with extra tracks on it, but that's about it.
Okay. Well, that was kind of a no-brainer. Did you know George and those guys? Wait a second. Was Brian Forsyth on Pain?
No, it was
still Greg.
It was still Greg. Yeah.
Greg. Yeah. Greg Fields. Greg Fiddleman.
It's a great thing.
Awful proud to call him friend, being that he's with his successes.
So how did you end up in Rhino Bucket? How did?
Yeah, that's where I was going with.
How do you transition from ACD? Well, I'm sorry. You went from ACDC to Dio and then Rhino Bucket. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was.
So how did that happen?
Ronnie got an offer to go back to Black Sabbath when they were doing the Humanizer album and tour, and he kind of put the band on hold. I was floating around, and it was through a friend of my ex-wife's, and she said, "There's this great band who need a drummer," and we were floating around. Oh, my mother and father were over from England, so they wanted to meet up. So there's me and my mom and dad and George and Greg and Reeve.
Wow! In
this diner, and we got all on really great together. I mean, you know, George, he's a sweetheart. He's a really smart guy too. You know, I mean, but we all just got along really, really well. And they left the album with me, the first one. And I thought, this is really good stuff, you know. It's got the DC thing going on, but it kind of has its own life about it too. The way they kind of keep the songs theirs as well, you know. Mm-hmm. So a lot of DC riffs, but anyway, it was just through a friend of a friend, and they were due to start recording a new album, and we did that, and it was all good.
That's great. I want to throw a wild card in here. I missed this event, and I can't even say what year it was, somewhere in the mid-2000s, and there's probably a lot of things like this that a lot of us don't realize or know or even remember for whatever reason, but I swear someone told me they went to up there, hey, I'm going to go see Pat Travers tonight. He's playing at a club downtown Austin called Room 710. Yeah. And then the next day I was like, hey, how was that Pat Travers gig? Dude, Simon Wright was on drums. And I'm like, what? Is that true? You did the tour with Pat Travers?
Yeah, I jumped at the chance. I mean, Pat Travers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that live album and all that.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's recorded in Austin, Texas.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, at the Austin Opera House. Yeah.
No, I didn't even know that.
What a fantastic album.
Yes, unbelievable. It's like greatest hits album.
Yeah. I mean, it was this guy who was in Houston, and he knew a guy who knew Pat Travers, and he'd been working with Pat before on some other project, and he put us together. I mean, it was me. It was an odd situation, but it really worked. It was me and Greg T. Walker from Black Folk, right? So, and we were like, you know, it was the three of us, like power trio. So, and it was amazing. But this guy who organized it was always fucking. I think we did like about 2 weeks, and it was all in Texas. I think there was one in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's near Texas, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We crossed the border.
Right.
So, but this guy was always around, scratching his head, always had a scowl on his face. I said, "What's it?" He said, "Well, you know, this is a set list I gave to Pat. I want him to play these songs." You know, he was kind of organized all the shows and everything. And Pat wasn't doing that. He was just playing like all these blues riffs and some what do you call them? Copies of songs, a Grand Funk song.
Yeah.
Forget which one. So anyway, but other than that, it was just an absolute joy. I mean, Pat is amazing. He's one of these guys. He's a little bit like Doug Aldrich. He never has a guitar off him. You know, he's always got a guitar on, rather, and he's always fiddling around. So he's standing there in front of me, you know, and he's fucking around like this. And I'm just like, that's fucking cool. You know?
Yeah.
You know?
It's like the way that they speak.
Yeah.
The way they talk. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was great fun. I mean, playing those songs like Snort and Whiskey and Boom Boom and all the rest of it, it was fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of amazing guitarists, you also did a couple albums with UFO, and I want to know what it was like to work with Michael Schenker. But we were speaking earlier about Jimmy Bain, and I really want to know what it was like to work with Pete Way.
Pete, yeah. You know what? I never did any records with them. We started rehearsing some songs in London, and but it just didn't happen. The whole thing exploded or imploded. It was great.
You didn't record any records with them?
No, there is one record out, just for if people want to know. It's an album called Covenant.
Right.
And that's a studio album, but on the other side is a live album.
Okay.
I'm on that live album, but unfortunately that's the only one that I got to do with them. But yeah, I mean, Pete, he's like a sweetheart, you know. I mean, he's just such a character, man. I mean, there's so many stories with him, and some of them I won't share, but he's a sweetheart. I mean, I remember one time, it's a pretty harmless story, really, but it kind of tells you a bit about Pete. He called me up. We had about 3 days off in London, and he called me up from his room, and he goes, "Hey, Si, do you want to come with me and come and meet my brother?" And I'm like, "Well, I was going to go to the pub, actually, Pete." You know, and he's like, "Well, no, you just come with me. It won't take long." It took us like four buses and a tube train. It took 6 hours to get there to see his brother, you know. And then them two, so we meet in this pub up there where his brother is totally opposite to him. He's like got a suit on, the tie, you know, the whole thing. Meanwhile, Pete's got on like an old shaggy coat with paint all over it and whatever. They just sat there, the two, just reminiscing over old days, and I'm just looking out the window going like, "Oh, this is good." You know?
I'm a huge Pete Way fan. I've just always admired his playing, of course, but him as a personality, much like you described Jimmy Bain earlier, one of these guys that just has a lust for life and lived it at 100 miles an hour. And it must have been, I'm sure it just had to be really cool to spend so much time with him in close proximity and get to know him as a person.
It wasn't hard either. I mean, it was the same with all of them. You know, I got the gig. I'll tell you how I got that gig. I got it through another friend of a friend. But for the longest time, I was talking to Michael Schenker's manager there. Her name was Bella. She's since passed away. But we were back and forth, and it was going to be the Michael Schenker group. So she had me learning like One Night at Budokan with Cozy on it. She's like, play the way Cozy does. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And then I didn't hear from her for the longest time. I mean, it seemed like a long time. It's about 5-6 weeks. And she called back and said, well, things have changed. Now it's going to be UFO. And I went, oh, all right. Worth a wait.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so, you know, we met up in Arizona, in Phoenix, I think it was. And there's an old place up there called Electric Ballroom. We rehearsed there for about a week. And Michael came in, and it was always Michael and then the band kind of thing. You know, he had his own way of doing things and being somewhere. And but we all got along straight away. I mean, we're all from England, and we all got on great. You know, I got to be good friends with Paul Raymond. God bless him.
Yes.
We hung out in many a steakhouse and drank the cellar dry. But Phil Mogg as well. I mean, he's a total gentleman. I mean, you know, the real gentleman kind of from the old days. I mean, it was just a fantastic. We all got along so well. It was a great time in UFO. Really, really enjoyed that.
So your resume, I'm sitting here listening to you talk about being in UFO, and, you know, the obvious one is AC/DC, but then, you know, Ronnie James Dio, UFO, Pat Travers, and for me and Jason being Rhino Bucket fans, that's just as big as all the rest I've just mentioned.
You're not wrong. Yeah,
it's pretty incredible. All the greatness that you've rubbed elbows with and created with and toured with and got to know and be part of the family for a little while. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
You had quite a career.
I know. It's sometimes, you know, you think of these bands and you never think you're actually going to be a part of it. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I had the jacket on with all the patches on and Rush on the back and Black Sabbath. And, you know, I was just... like we all are, like fans. Oh, I mean, and now in the fucking band, it's like, what the hell happened here? And, you know, one thing though, I mean, if you do it, if you get it, you got to work it. I mean, it's not, you know, I'm not complaining. It's hard work, but you know, it's been. I feel very grateful. You know, I mean, and I met a lot of cool people. And
yeah, you have a humble way about you, Simon, and you could say, you know, you've lived a charmed, you know, but it's also ethics and work and a little bit of right place at the right time, but it all turns into, you know, that you don't feel deserving. And you feel, that's what I mean. It's a beautiful and humble thing for you because first and foremost, you're a fan.
Yeah.
And then you're a drummer, and then, you know how to write songs, and you know how to do the work without pissing anybody off in this band that you have the ultimate respect for.
Yeah, that's in a nutshell. Yeah, basically. Thanks, Jason. I mean, I don't know any other way to be. I'm like, you know, you fucking respect people, you know, except that guy, you know. But, you know, don't take no shit from anybody and just get on with life. I mean, it's like the initial shock sometimes of like meeting these all these different musicians and bands that I've been so fortunate to be involved with it's always that initial meeting that is awkward, you know, because you were listening to him on you know, you had his album or you had their album, and now you're actually going to meet them. I mean, it's like, it's become easier over the years, you know. I'm not done yet, but, you know, it's like, that's the difficult part. And then once you've got over that, that's when the hard work starts. Getting to know them and stuff, and the little foibles, and then actually doing the gigs, you know. That's how it goes. So.
Let me ask you, a couple years ago, maybe, I don't know, it might be 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago now, AC/DC is having trouble with Phil Rudd, and he's in a bunch of legal trouble over in New Zealand, and it looks like he's going to prison and all this mess. Was there ever a time when AC/DC called you and thought about having you come back? No.
We hadn't been in any kind of involvement for a long time. After, you know, I finished up and I went on and I did all this other stuff and everything and stuff, and, you know, I mean, I went back to, I was convinced to go back to see this show on a Black Ice tour they did by Cosmo Wilson, who's their lighting guy. So, and Cosmo was Ronnie's lighting guy for a long time, and many others. He's fantastic and a lovely person. But he convinced me to go back. I saw the show, and then he said, "Come back and see. Just come and say hello to them." I'm like, "It's all right. No, I'm good, you know." Wow. He said, "No, you're coming." So he dragged me back. Okay. I was chatting with Malcolm and Angus and all of them, Cliff and Brian. And it was good, you know, because there wasn't any kind of animosity going on there. It'd just been a long time. Yeah. And, so that was the last time I saw them. And I saw what was going on with Phil Rudd. I mean, I was amazed. I'm like, he did what? Yeah. Really?
Wow.
Some good shit he's on. Fuck.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wasn't expecting a call. I wasn't looking for, you know, waiting on a call or anything, because Chris Slade was around and stuff, and he'd been the drummer after me. And
sure.
I don't know. I was watching what was going on. Believe me, in amazement. But, you know, no, I wasn't waiting for a call.
Yeah. So
they knew how to get a hold of me, but they didn't call me. But that's absolutely fine. So,
just so we're clear, why did your time in AC/DC end? What was the?
Well, it was just. I mean, I'd been in the band about 7.5 years and all, and it was basically about the drumming. And it's nothing to knock the music or anything. I just needed to do more with my drumming, and I was becoming a little bit complacent, and they could kind of see this too, and it just wasn't ending up being fair on anybody.
Right.
So, you know, although when the shows that every show I did with them, I played 110%. You know,
right.
I knew I had to do that. You know, so. It was just, I just had to move on and do something else. It was, you know, I got in that band young, and it seemed like I'd been in the band a long time, you know. So I really had to just get my head together and move on, you know. So
yeah. I wanted to ask one more question on my end. I wanted to ask you about working with Jeff Tate, and actually, what I really want to ask is what it was like working with our friend John Moyer, who is a fellow Texan and a friend of mine and Jason.
Yeah. Well, it was great working with both of them. Jeff is a real gentleman. You know, he's very easygoing. When we first started up, we had to learn the whole of Operation Mindcrime, so we're all looking at each other going, well, what's that bit again? Wait a minute, yeah. You know? I mean, it's another one that, you know, just tap away and think you've got it, you know, tapping away with your fingers, and then you go and sit in the rehearsal place and try and play it. It's like, you know, quite a lot of, you know, progressive stuff going on there.
Yeah.
So that was really, you know, it was really gratifying when we actually started to really bond and make sense. It was me and Rudy Sarzo, his brother Robert, Kelly Gray, Randy Gain, and Jeff, obviously. And it was this real small rehearsal room with one light bulb above it in the room, you know, and we're all jammed in there. It's crazy times, but we got it done, and we went out with that for about 3.5 years. So wow. that was some good times. Yeah.
So Did John Moyer join the band at some point?
He did. He came in and helped out because some of the shows Rudy couldn't make for one reason or another. He had other commitments or something. But yeah, John would come in, and ultimate professional, great bass player, great guy. I mean, what can you say about John? He's the world.
We love John. Yeah. Good guy.
Yeah. He's a great guy. Yeah. But it was a good time with Jeff. He gave us a little room too, you know, to move with the songs a little bit there.
Wow, that's I don't mean to sound so surprised, but with a band with Queensryche material, I'll just say, it seems like it's a tight ship
Well,
parts,
when I say that, there wasn't a lot of room, but there were certain things the way that Scott Rockenfield would play, and don't get me wrong, he's a brilliant drummer. I mean, some of the stuff he's come up with, amazing. But I play a slightly different way. I'm more, and it's only just odd little bits, and he wouldn't mind if I just changed them up, and I changed them up a little bit so it wouldn't mess with the song.
I see.
Yeah. But it's a great time. Should have seen it. There's some good times.
Well, from to kind of piggyback off what Dave said, and then what we were talking about, from Four on the Floor to Mindcrime.
Right.
Yeah.
Really says a lot about style and
Ability.
Ability and how good you are with math.
Well, I think I always felt that I had good meter. I mean, I didn't analyze the shit out of it. I just play, and it seemed like I have good meter. So it's like that. The DC stuff was kind of like the laying the foundation, and then by the time the whole clock goes around and you end up with Mindcrime, it's like, oh, okay, well, hey, at least it's in time.
Yeah. Well, that's saying something.
Yeah, I suppose it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Dave.
Well, let me ask you this. We asked some of our friends and pretty much randomly anyone, but we're asking you today, what was it that got you into drums, and just or originally what got you into wanting to what did you hear? What record did you hear? What band did you see that made you go, I want to do that? Or what was the first record you bought, and how did you get into rock and roll, basically?
Well, the first record LP that I bought was Jailbreak, Thin Lizzy.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and that was only because I'd seen, there's a British TV program a long time ago called Top of the Pops.
Yes. And
it's a bit like American Bandstand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although I think American Bandstand, the bands played live. On Top of the Pops, they didn't. But whatever. Anyway, that was where I first started seeing drummers and bands and stuff and all. And it was for the longest time, there was no like heavy rock or heavy metal on Top of the Pops. But then some bands started breaking through, like UFO and Lizzy and Priest, and they were on. And I'd see that, and I'd go like, "Oh, that looks pretty cool." And I'd always kind of focus in on it for some reason. And I'd always be tapping away at home. I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I don't know. I mean, my dad used to play in the Boy Scouts. But he was just on a snare drum, and he really didn't follow on after he left them when he became a man,
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it just sort of clicked with me, and I thought that drumming stuff looks pretty interesting. I wouldn't mind having a go at that.
Yeah, Brian Downey is pretty unbelievable.
I think he's so underrated. So underrated.
He is, man. He is, and I mean,
amazing drum.
When you listen to some of those shuffles he does, they're very cool.
Yeah.
And even the early days, I mean, you've got your Black Rose and stuff, which is amazing. But you've got Johnny the Fox, some of the playing on there, so underrated. He's a brilliant drummer.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I've never met the man. I wouldn't mind meeting up with him and having a chat with him at some point.
You guys should try to hook up and have a pint and get some cameras rolling and
you think so?
Just start a show. Yeah. Have a pint with Bry and Cy tonight at 11.
There you go, Bry and Cy.
I can see it now. I'll produce the show.
This just happened. This is amazing. This is going to work.
Well, it's
right, the Guinness.
Yeah, it's been incredible talking to you today, and I just want to thank you very much for being on our podcast today.
Sure, man. No problem.
You were the first drummer I saw with AC/DC, my very first AC/DC concert. So this is very special for me to have you on the podcast today. And your career that we've, been talking about for the past hour or so, just incredible. So thank you for all the music. It was nice spending some time with you. I feel like I got to know you a little bit, and you're a really cool dude. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Dave. That's cool.
Absolutely.
Good talking with you both.
And with that, I will go ahead and sign off. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host Jason McMaster and our very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, thank you so much, Mr. Simon Wright.